I'll call to order the House Committee on Armed Services, Subcommittee on Readiness to order. In the interest of time, we will dispense with our opening statements, and General Paxton will go directly to you. I understand that you will give the opening statements for the panel, and then we will proceed into questions unless there's anything additional that you might have.
No, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the subcommittee again, and General Walters from our Deputy Commandant for Program and Resources, and Major General Coglianese from our Assistant Deputy Commandant for Installations and Logistics. So it's great to be with the committee again, sir. Thank you. So Chairman Whitman, Ranking Member Bordillo, and distinguished members of the Readiness Subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today and to report on the readiness of your United States Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is committed to remaining our nation's ready force, a force that is truly capable of responding to a crisis anywhere around the globe and at a moment's notice. It has been so for the last 240 years since Captain Samuel Nichols led his Marines ashore in Nassau on this very day in 1776. Last year, the Congress was kind enough to reiterate the expectations of the 82nd Congress that the Marine Corps continue to serve as our nation's expeditionary force in readiness and to be most ready when the nation is least ready. I thank you for that reaffirmation and assure you that your Marine Corps is meeting today and will continue to meet tomorrow your rightly high expectations. Marines continue to be in demand from all our combatant commanders around the world. They're forward deployed, engaged on land and sea, and ready for crisis response in Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Last year, Marines conducted airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. They enabled Georgian forces who were operating in Afghanistan, and they conducted life-saving disaster response operations in Nepal, among many other missions, all while remaining poised to respond at a moment's notice. Maintaining that fight-to-night warfighting relevance across our 5 pillars of readiness, and I believe you all have a handout there that we'll refer to during the course of the testimony on the 5 pillars of readiness. That's what keeps us, requires a careful balancing, rather. We must constantly balance between our operational readiness and our institutional readiness, between capability and capacity, between current operations and future operations, between steady state and surge readiness, as well as between low-end and high-end operations and training. All of this as we face increasing and varied demands from the COCOMs. In our challenging fiscal environment, we're struggling to maintain all of those balances. As the Commandant said in his posture statement earlier this week, the Marine Corps is no longer in a healthy position to generate current readiness and reset all of our equipment while simultaneously sustaining our facilities and modernizing to ensure our future readiness. We have continued to provide the COCOMs with operationally ready forces prepared to execute all assigned missions. In some cases, these units are only fully trained to just those assigned missions and not to the full spectrum of possible operations. In addition, this operational readiness is generated at the cost of our wider institutional readiness. This year, I must again report that approximately half of our non-deployed units are suffering from some degree of personnel, equipment, or training shortfalls. We continue to prioritize modernization for our most urgent areas, primarily the replacement of aging aircraft and aging amphibious assault vehicles. And we defer other needs. Our installations continue to be bill payers for today's readiness, putting the hard-earned gains from the past decade, and indeed much of that the committee and the Congress has helped us with, at risk. While our deployed forces continue to provide the capabilities demanded by the COCOMs, our capacity to do so over time and in multiple locations remains strained. Our deployment to dwell time ratio continues to exceed the rate that we consider sustainable in the long term. The strains on our personnel equipment are showing in many areas, particularly in aviation, in communications, and in intelligence. We have already been forced to reduce the capacity available to the COCOMs by reducing the number of aircraft assigned to several of our aviation squadrons, and we expect to continue those reductions throughout 2017. While we are able to maintain steady-state operations today, to include the ever-expanding Phase Zero operations as we shape theaters and work on theater security cooperation and building partnership capacity, our ability to surge for the crisis of the warfight becomes increasingly challenged. Though your Marine Corps remains able to meet all the requirements of the defense strategy to conduct high-end operations in a major contingency response, we may not be able to do so with a level of training for all our units or along the timelines that would minimize our costs in damaged equipment and in casualties. These challenges in balancing provide the context for my message today. Your Marine Corps remains ready to answer the nation's call, but with no margin for error on multiple missions in which failure is not an option. To win in today's world, we have to move quickly, we have to move decisively, and we have to move with overwhelming force. So, Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity for all of us to appear before the committee. I ask that you accept the written statement for the record and prepare to answer questions, sir.
Very good. General Paxton, thank you so much. Lieutenant General Walters, Major General Coglianese, thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks so much for your leadership. We understand it's a challenging time with all the threats we see around the world, and they change and morph each and every day, and we want to make sure that we are here listening intently to what the Marine Corps' needs are to regenerate and maintain that readiness. As you spoke of, the readiness recovery effort is based on projecting the time frames from a foundation of being able to reestablish that readiness. Within that framework, give us your projections about when the Marine Corps will attain on that path, setting the conditions for readiness and then moving from there, when it will attain full spectrum readiness, and on what percentage do you think on that path you'll meet as you get, hopefully, to that full spectrum readiness. And then let us know, too, on the way, obviously, there'll be some risk that you'll assume, and you spoke about that risk. What core functions will you assume that risk in? Because what we want to make sure is that, you know, we are understanding where that risk might rest and help where we can as we put together this year's NDAA. So if you'll do that, and of course you can put that in the context of the FY17 Navy budget and what it provides for you as you're setting those conditions for readiness recovery.
Thank you, Chairman. Understand, and also try and defer to my colleagues so you get a little different sense in terms of how the budget was indeed balanced, and work with the Department of the Navy, and then also where the exact, some of the exemplars are from particular sets of equipment, sir. Mm-hmm. So if I may, sir, if I understood then, for two questions, the first part of your question was when? When, yes. So we will continue, as we have in years past, to make sure that the forces that are deployed today are 100% trained, 100% ready. Mm-hmm. Within the time we are allotted, we can also guarantee that the next two deploy forces will be 100% trained, 100% certified, 100% ready. Mm-hmm. The issue is for the ones beyond there. Right. And in addition, as you heard me say in the oral statement, sir, we have several example communities where we have had to go back, and in order to reset equipment and generate future readiness, we have had to reduce the density of units that are all deployed. Perhaps the most stressed community, and the examples that I would submit to the subcommittee, are aviation. We have several type model series where the aircraft is aging. We continue to fly them a lot, particularly our F-18s and AV-8s on the fixed wing side. We have gotten rid of the V-20, the CH-46 community, sir, but as we brought on the V-22 community, we brought them on early. They are 2 to 3 times the speed, 2 to 3 times the range, 2 to 3 times the lift. They have proven themselves in Iraq and Afghanistan, but they're in high demand by the COCOMs. So we look to train new pilots in the V-22, and we need to bring new aircraft on board. In addition, we need to bring on the sustainment capability for them. So right now we only have 14 of our 18 projected V-22 squadrons. We struggle sometimes to get all the parts out there and then to keep the pilots trained. So the answer to your first question, sir, in terms of when, we do not believe that we're going to have full spectrum aviation readiness until at least 2020. And that is presuming that the budget continues as it is, and that we can align dollars to maintain hours to fly pilots, and then the actual people in the pipeline, sir. So that's the answer to your first question, sir. The second question on pacing items and examples of things where we take risk. Several years ago, if I was over to testify, I would have said that our combat engineers, our EOD capability, some of our unmanned systems were the pacing items for us. Right now, we find that some of the pacing items are actually our intelligence battalions, our radio signals battalions, our intelligence battalions, because those units are now not only forward deployed with our Marine Expeditionary units, but we have generated 2 special purpose Marine Air Ground Task Forces, one that supports AFRICOM and one that supports CENTCOM. Each of those is about 2,200 Marines. In the case of the CENTCOM one, they're operating over about 12 to 1,800 miles in 6 different countries, and they're very busy. Well, in order to make those units work, they need the command element that can integrate and plan and deliver air-ground logistics. So it's the intelligence and the communications that go there. That comes at the expense of the units in the States that provide the people and provide the equipment. So those units are all under a 1 to 2 depth of dwell now, and we watch the tempo. And then when they come back, Chairman, they're also reach-back capability. So units forward may be coming back to them for target analysis, for planning, and things like that. So in terms of the first one, sir, if you don't mind, I'll defer to General Walters
Sure.
if he has anything else.
Yes.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, you asked what did we take risk in?
General Walters, if I can get you to put your microphone on, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sorry, sir, I'm a
That's-
pilot and I didn't press the button.
No problem.
You asked about where we took risk in the 17 budget. I have some examples for you. Basically in 3 areas. Number one, we couldn't take any risk in end strength. You can't do that. And in fact, we can make an argument that depth of dwell is directly related to our end strength and why that, and it might not be sufficient to do what we need to do and meet the timelines that the Assistant Commandant laid out. We took half of our JLT production to balance the 17 column. We were only at 74% in FSRM, and we lost 44% of our MILCON. Our O&M funds in 17 are, by my estimation, somewhere about $450 to $460 million less than what we would call our minimum base to do what we need to do for in 17. Hopefully that gives you some context of what we're talking about. And a lot of these are reflected in our unfunded priority list that we sent over.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like to me the term we hear of tiered readiness, which
Yes, sir. We don't do tiered readiness.
I know.
But we have readiness issues as we face fiscal challenge.
That's right. Well, and when you have to manage risk, you almost end up by default tiering the readiness
sir.
capability across different sectors.
Yes, sir. And you park risk on places that make you suck your teeth when you put the budget together.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to go down to Ms. Bordallo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, generals. General Paxton, my question is for you. You mentioned that the Marine Corps has struggled to maintain the balance between current and future readiness, often being required to defer the latter in favor of the former. So what steps can Congress take to allow you to budget adequately to meet your readiness requirements?
Thank you, Ranking Member Bordallo. The Congress has been very generous in terms of working with us to answer specific needs. Given the overall reduction in the total obligation authority since PB 12, which is the baseline that we use to measure, the issue for us becomes the challenge of within the Department of Defense, future readiness versus current readiness. So we fully understand and support both the President and the SecDef and their move for the third offset strategy. And we know that there are things we must do in terms of nuclear capability, cyber capability, space capability, whether it's buying new or replacing old. But those elements are increasingly costly as the threat of adversaries around the world makes great inroads on us. So invariably, Congresswoman, we think that the future expenses there are often taken at the result of end strength and current capability. So we struggle within that balance to support what we know needs to be done nationally for the defense strategy, but to maintain current bench readiness. So we watch our end strength very carefully, and we also watch our ability to get beyond just today's fight, ma'am. So the money is there. Other things that pressurize us within the Department of the Navy, our shipmates and colleagues in the Navy have been very good. We work with them on aviation capability and on amphibious shipping capability, but the Don budget is pressurized by the Ohio Replacement Program. So there are some big bills and some must-pay bills nationally that continue to pressurize the day-to-day ops today, ma'am.
So I guess what you're saying, General, then, is that we have to continue to be innovative, right? And work with what we have.
Well, ma'am, we certainly understand that. But again, within the budget constraints that we know we have to operate under, at some point we believe that capacity has and depth on the bench has a capability all its own.
Good. This is either for you or General Walters. What are the impacts for Marines and their families, as well as operational readiness, of asking Marines to average closer to a 1 to 2 deployments rather than your target of 1 to 3? whichever one.
Yeah, so, ma'am, I'll start, but then I'll defer to both my colleagues, because General Walters was the commanding general of the 2nd Marine Aviation Wing, and they were over in Afghanistan 3 years ago, so he can tell you about that. And General Coglianese was the commanding general of the 1st Marine Logistics Group out on the West Coast. So the challenge for us, obviously, is Marines joined to fight, Marines joined to travel around the world. So we don't have a problem with first-term Marines, officer or enlisted, active duty or reserve component. They come in to do what Marines do, which is go around the world and fight. But as we continue the deployment schedule, sometimes it does become onerous. There's education requirements you have for the individual Marine. There's schooling, not only professional military education within their occupational specialties, but just tactical and technical training as well. We need to get them out to independent duty. We always need recruiters and drill instructors. So how we manage the career expectations that the institution needs and that the individual expects with a 1 to 2 depth to dwell becomes a challenge. And then as the force ages, right now the average Marine is just a little over 25 years old. Most of the force is on their first term, and 75% of the force is forward deployed. So we are all the services are busy, but against even that metric, we are the youngest and the most forward deployed. So as the force ages, it becomes harder.
General Walters?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. The other aspect I would add to the Assistant Commandant's statement is 1 to 2, 1 to 3, what does it really mean? 1 to 3 gives you time, and the time to train, and when you get back from a deployment, if you are gone for 6 months and you're going to be back for a year, the first month is basically leave and resetting your equipment. The last 6 months is training, if you do it right, and you got to train for the next deployment. That doesn't leave you a whole lot of time to reset the force, both in equipment and personnel. So if you want to achieve readiness, you have to provide time for these Marines to come back, reset themselves, and then train themselves back up and be a whole unit. And it's really the people and the equipment together, and the training opportunity in time for them to get ready for their next deployment. That's what we see stressed. If you provided more time, then they would be ready for the full range of military operations, 1, and 2. One of the only ways to do that is quit deploying as much as they are now, or having a bigger force. Those are the two levers you can pull to get to a 1 to 3, which is the optimum. Thank you, ma'am.
And did you want to hear from? He said it all. All right. General Walters, the Marine Corps is an important element of the U.S. Asia-Pacific rebalance, and we'll be conducting a RIMPAC exercise this summer. Now, how do you anticipate that these deployments will build readiness and contribute to regional security policy in the Pacific? General?
Yes, ma'am. The RIMPAC operation, I think we're also using as a vehicle to test out our new an alternative, as you say, become more innovative with our organizations. The RIMPAC operation is going to have that component in there. Our posture in the Pacific, as you are well aware, that we are committed to 22,500 Marines west of the date line. We have a plan for that. And I think as we proceed down there, the fiscal pressures on exercises such as RIMPAC are going to be more and more telling, even this year and at our current funding level in this fiscal year. We're already getting inputs of reducing the scope and scale of a lot of our exercises. RIMPAC is one of those ones that we'll try and preserve at its full capability and capacity, ma'am. Thank you.
I have another question here for General Coglianese. We have heard that the construction schedule for the FRF has been delayed by 2 years, and Congressman, the chairman, Mr. Whitman, and I were just in Okinawa. We heard about this, and it is my hope that the government of Japan can quickly resolve the remaining issues so we can get the construction of the FRF and the Okinawa Consolidated Plan back on schedule. It is important that we continue to sustain our infrastructure and operational capabilities at Futenma. So to that end, can you please describe some of the key infrastructure investments you intend to make in FY17 to ensure Futenma continues to meet the operational requirements of the Marine Corps?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. The whole rebalancing has many pieces to it, and as far as Okinawa, as you know, there's political ramifications, legal suits from the local Okinawans with Japan itself, and the project has been delayed. But we're I think on the course still with our DPRI plan of moving forces around from Okinawa to Guam. We see it as a delay, but not stopping anything we're doing. As far as reinvesting in Fatima, we're not planning on doing any major reinvesting in Fatima that I know of because of the alternate site that we're going to.
I think what I want to hear is that this will not affect the move to Guam. Our construction and so forth is ongoing, and I think this is what concerns my constituents back home, that there's another delay in this move. So would you say then that this is, General Paxton?
I was going to say, ranking member, that we're still on track. I don't think it's delaying. As you know, the 3 MILCON projects that we had were slid 1 year. We do have a power plant being built, and also the government of Japanese government
This is money from,
is also doing, as you know, MILCON projects on Guam as we speak. So although it's tied together, we see the plan still as on track for Guam, just delayed on the MILCON, but it's, we still think we're going to be IOC and as we predicted.
well, just a few years ago, we found out that ultimately Guam was delinked from this Futenma situation, so.
So, Madam Ranking Member, it is a distributed laydown. So when we look at the pieces, we realize there's some connections between what happens on Okinawa with the FRF and up at the Hanoko area, what happens in Iwakuni, what happens in Guam, what happens in Darwin, and what happens in Hawaii. So we try to keep all those pieces linked, and they have to stay linked in terms of the environmental study, the monies available for MILCON, the ability to train people. The risk that we have is we never want to have a Marine stationed somewhere where he or she is not able to train or not deployable. But the master plan in terms of movement to Guam and have some of the 3 MEF and 3rd MARDIV units actually relocate from Okinawa to Guam is still an integral piece of the distributed laydown in the Pacific, ma'am.
Thank you, General. Now I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Pordalio. We'll now go to Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And I know the last couple of years you've had to manage through the sequester, shutdowns, continuing resolutions. If you get an appropriation measure, it's at the last minute, and you've got a big job to do. And the fact of the matter is, you don't know what your budget is going to be or your appropriation is going to be for next year. And I appreciate your courtesy, General Paxton, but thank you. Might should be replaced with thank you, sir. May I have another? I think you've been treated very unfairly by us in the last several years, especially with all of the things that we expect you to do. As you know, the Marines, you've got distributed ground forces. You maintain forward presence in a lot of areas. You're responsible for establishing local relationships and responding rapidly to a tremendous number of things that can happen anywhere in the world. You're not investing in the unmanned aerial systems, the Group 5s, the MQ-9s that have the extended loiter time. And I just wonder, when we talk about the close air support mission, how much additional risk is being taken by not investing in more MQ-9s? And is that an area where we need to do something to get more of those for you, or additional close air support weapons?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I'll start and then defer again to General Walters as the wing commander and as the program. But the short answer to your question is absolutely, we're taking risk in unmanned aerial systems, regardless of whether it's Group 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. We would like to have more. That is cutting-edge technology. There is much to do in terms of innovation to see how we can integrate an unmanned system with a manned system. The Commandant was just out on the West Coast last week to take a look at future options for that integration. The challenge for us continues to be the pacing item of our manned systems that we are absolutely essential to moving Marines around the battlefield, to delivering ordnance on targets, and to sustaining the fight. So once again, it's that delicate trade-off between the current fight and the future fight. We're committed to unmanned systems. We have at least 2 that are programs of record here that we're working with the Department of the Navy to continue to procure, and we know that's an area that we have to get, as the Commandant said, smarter, better, faster, cheaper in. So,
Sure. Thank you, Representative Scott. To emphasize a couple of things the ACMAC have said, we have Class 1, 2, and 3, and we have a Class 3 program in the RQ-21. The Commandant has tasked us to go back and look at a capabilities analysis of that, and what do we want, or what do we need? The trick is always when you talk Class 4 and Class 5 is Class 4 is something we could probably afford if we take some risks elsewhere, and we'll get some benefit from that. Class 5 is kind of a UAV that's, do you need it in the Marine Corps? Do you need access to it in joint? We fully support. I mean, in Afghanistan, we use the MQ-9s, we use the Predators, the Reapers. Everything was over my AO. Obviously, if we're in a joint force, then we need to have the joint capability available to us. But we are taking a very serious look at it and seeing what we can afford. I think the Commandant would want to propose buying as much as we could to put in the MAGTF, because we're sometimes by ourselves in different places of the world. But this is I guess I could say it's a real big debate point right now. What can we afford, and how quick can we get it?
But as long as you have it in the joint force, you feel like.
Well, that's an option, but there are scenarios where if the joint force is not available, then we have to look very seriously at what capability we bring in the Marine Corps, and we need to pursue that.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. We'll now go to Mrs. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's good to see you all here. We've been very, very fortunate, Mr. Chairman, that we had great leadership at Camp Pendleton in San Diego, and I was delighted to have an opportunity to work particularly with General Paxton and General Coglianese. So thank you again for being here and for your dedication to our country. One of the discussions that we've had over the last few weeks, particularly is the Russian aggression in the Baltics. And I wondered if you could respond to the European Reassurance Initiative and how that might be impacted by the situation of prepositioning our stocks in Norway. How are we doing with the progress of that and shifting the focus from transportation to heavier equipment in the area? Where do you think that is, and what do you need? I guess I would also say, because I think we hear from our constituents all the time, and we know the military will do anything that we ask of them, particularly the Marines. I think people are often thinking of the Marines when they think about that, but and they want us to keep them safe here at home. Often you hear some criticism, if you will, that we have too many troops in the European theater. So could you put this together so people understand how important it is?
Thank you, Congressman Davis. I'll start and then defer to General Coglianese, who can talk a little bit actually about the prepositioning. We are keenly aware of the emergence of another potential fight tonight area in terms of Russian aggression through Europe. As you and the members of the committee well remember, in days of old, the Marines had a mission on the northern and southern flank of the European AOR with our special purpose MAGTF that works for the Africa commander. The previous AFRICOM and EUCOM commanders were able to broker a unit and force sharing agreement so that forces could chop relatively quickly and seamlessly back and forth between the two of them. So we have a large component of that special purpose MAGTF, and they are titled the Black Sea Rotation Force. So for several years now, they have been doing bilateral and multilateral engagements and exercises primarily on the southern flank and working out of 2 particular countries there where we have some basing and station arrangements. That special purpose MAGTF still is dependent on mobility to get to where they need to go, so they need V-22s and KC-130s and things that are already in short supply for everyone else. So we do have forces over there. We do depend on the ERI to help them out. We don't have enough density there, and we don't have enough mobility there. As we speak here today, we are recovering Marines from exercise cold response in Norway, where we work with Norwegian and United Kingdom allies to train up there. And this is really the first time since pre-9/11 that we have had a large footprint north of the Arctic Circle doing cold weather operations. So we are slowly reestablishing environmental capability and fighting capability in those two areas. The issue for us remains getting in the power projection piece and then sustaining. So we are back to the discussion we have about the adequacy and the availability of our amphibious fleet to get us to those two theaters, because they are remote and you have great sea lines of communication to get there. And then we are dependent on maritime prepositioning or cave prepositioning for supplies. As you know, Congresswoman, we got rid of one of the MPS runs. It was largely a fiscally driven decision several years ago. But we only have 2 maritime prepositioning squadrons now, both in the Pacific AOR. We would like to have that one back in Europe. That would be a big boon. In the absence of that, we continue to use the caves in Norway, and I'll let General Coglianese talk about what those caves mean to us and what is and is not there, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. As you know, that Mibsaron squadron was in the Mediterranean too, so it was located in the European area. There's a lot of emphasis on the caves right now, our prepositioning. We've recently put more things in it. It's surrounded. It's basically a battalion landing team, mechanized, with a command element, assets, and some logistics assets, and some aviation assets, or for ground aviation logistics. There's tanks, AAVs, and you know the Norwegians are very good partners, and it's been a great relationship since '86 when we started the program. But it's the emphasis on that program, I think, is really has been spotlighted and is increased in recent times with attention in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I can go on to tell you more about what's in there, but like you said, right now, the exercise is going right now. It's been very successful in drawing that equipment out, and it's, once again, we'll reconstitute it, put it back in with our partners in Norwegian, and use it for future exercises.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Appreciate it. Mr. Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank generals for being here today. Really do appreciate everything that you do. You know, I'm concerned when you start hearing about the dwell time. You know, Marine Corps really had their, had their act together, I think, in regards to dwell time versus, you know, I got 3 sons in the Army. You know, 15 months in Afghanistan isn't exactly the best outcome. And so I start to worry when you hear dwell time slipping, particularly when the Marine Corps, I believe, did a great job. And, you know, it really does help, you know, that, your troops, but also their families that are, you know, left behind to have to make it. At what point, you know, we cut the Marine Corps end strength. At what point do we get to where I know we'll fight if we have to, but at some point in time, I think we have to start making decisions about where we fight, because what we don't want to do is break the Marine Corps or the Army, for that matter. So is there a breaking point that we hopefully have not come close to, but is there such thing as a breaking point?
So thank you, Congressman Nugent. I am sure there is a breaking point. We don't always know where it is. We try to predict it. We try to predict the breaking point by readiness or by risk or by fiscal or by people. What we always are mindful of is we don't want to find that breaking point in the rearview mirror and realize that we actually culminated some time ago and we can't do what we do. Right. To your question, sir, as I said in my opening statement, we're going to be ready with every unit tonight, and we're going to be ready with the next one that comes. So when the military plans, I believe, sir, that they plan against the most dangerous enemy course of action as opposed to the most likely enemy course of action. So when the geographic combatant commanders come before the committee and they say, here's what could happen in my AOR, those risks that any of those 6 geographic combatant commanders pose then become risks that are transferred institutionally to the 4 services. And then we worry about not that we can fight, but can we do 2 at 1? Can we do a delay and a deny? Can we do a win and a deny? And more importantly, in today's world where adversaries have increasing capability and more command and control, and they're developing better generation aircraft and a deeper bench for shipping, the issue is, can they project their power and will faster than we can respond? So our concern is not the quality of the soldier, sailor, airman, marine, and what we're going to do is, can we get enough of them to the point where we're at risk
Do we have
fast
the
enough?
capacity
So that's exactly.
with the same issue? It is about capacity. The will and readiness, the will to fight. I don't question any Marines' will to fight or any soldier's will to fight. But in the Army, at one point in time, I think they were staffed up to like 110%. So if they fielded, they would be with, 100% personnel ready to go. And they're struggling right now between, folks that, for whatever reason, medical, which is a big one. How's the Marine Corps doing in regards to, your strength of your units? I'm not talking about the ones deployed necessarily, but, the ones in reserve.
So our manpower situation, sir, is good right now. Our recruiting is good, our retention is good, our schooling is good, and the availability of the individual Marine and consequently the availability of the unit is good overall. The issue, as General Walters alluded to earlier, is the timing about getting the right number of the right grade, the right MOS, the right skill set to the right unit in time that they can do training to work up. And this is what happens when we go from a 1 to 3 to a 1 to 2. So when you make that big jump, what you sacrifice is that you're going to be ready just in time, and you're going to be ready just for the assigned mission. You don't have the latitude or the luxury to plan for other missions that could pop up, and you don't have the latitude to take a little bit longer and delay your deployment. So everything is a little bit of self-induced crisis.
No, sir, that's the depth of dwell and the end strength and how much you use it. On a daily basis, we use up our readiness. The only real lever we can provide is time to train. All the metrics we see on the quality of our people, the money we put into those programs seems to be working. It's what does the country want us to do? If the country wants us to do more than we're doing now, then then we could report to you that we might be closer to that breaking point. I think our depth of dwell now is about as high an operational tempo as we can stand. We have seen this in the past in the war in Afghanistan, Iraq. We saw the crisis in certain MOSs, and when we built the force back up, we targeted certain battalions, Cobra squadrons, 53 squadrons, and we targeted those just because that's what we could build, not because that was the only demand signal, but that's what we could accomplish.
Very good.
I think it was Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. Appreciate that. Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bells are ringing, so I'll be
Yeah,
real quick,
yes,
and thank you for your testimony. I think it's important to not let go unnoticed this morning. On page 13 of your testimony, the Marines, again, are the first service to hit initial operating capability for the F-35, which is really, I think, a new sort of milestone in, aviation history, not just for this country, but for the world. So again, congratulations to your team for doing that. Can you talk a little bit about the plan, which is to actually, send a squadron out to Japan in 2017, and what does that mean? I mean, in terms of, what are they going to do, and what is it replacing? And because obviously, I think this is quite significant, and again, you deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you, Congressman Courtney, and again, mindful of the time here, so we'll go quick. The F-35 did meet IOC last summer. We have a squadron that is full up in Yuma right now, and we are still on timeline to move that squadron to Iwakuni. The F-35 represents to us not only the VSTOL capability that we need to project power ashore, from ship to shore in an expeditionary operation, but it's also a fifth-generation aircraft, which means it has enhanced navigation, communications, and particularly EW and cyber capability. So the intent on moving it to Iwakuni, where we're grateful for the support for the facilities out there is that we can actually move from IOC to FOC and test it in an operational environment, sometimes working with other dissimilar aircraft, whether it's U.S. or allies, and actually see how good and how well we have designed and prepared the aircraft. As is always the case, if you put aircraft in the hands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, they'll help you figure out whether you did the designing and the production right or whether it has capabilities you didn't anticipate you could do. And General Walters?
No, sir, and it's going to the Pacific, and if you look at what the Navy's doing with their carrier laydown, the fifth-generation carrier, first fifth-generation carrier for the Navy is going to be on the West Coast. That has caused us to change our plans and follow the carrier out to the West Coast. So we're going to have to find some money to put the capability out there in Miramar.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. We appreciate that. We have votes, about 6 minutes left in the votes, so it won't allow us to be able to get there and get back in time. Mr. Gallego didn't have a chance to answer, to have his question asked, but I'll make sure that we take his questions, get them entered for the record. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for the great job that you do on behalf of our nation. Thanks for the great job your Marines do for our nation. We deeply appreciate all of your valuable information you provided for us today to make sure we give the proper direction in this year's NDAA to provide for the resources for the Marine Corps to continue on the path to restore readiness. So, folks, thanks again, and we are adjourned.